Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Trading Simplified. This is, again, the part of the show where I'm amazed. This is episode 22, just the amount of episode we have covered so far. And boy, I tell you what, it's flying by. So what we're going to talk about? Well, I have a few thoughts, obviously, given everything that's going on. And then I want to get back to the traits of traders because that seems to be taking us a while to get through. And one reason it's taking us a while to get through, if you go in and watch some of the courses that I've done, and find a YouTube such as Weekly Charts, on any one of these topics, I could spend at least an hour or two, and that's why it's taking so long to get through them all. Anyway, if you want some more information, including these slides and lots of links and a market timing course and a lot of other stuff, an intro course, go to davelandry.com/StockCharts and put your information in. And if you need to reach me, I do take requests, davelandry.com/contact. So a few thoughts before we get into traits of traders. As a general statement, I like to keep my commentary here as evergreen as possible. In other words, something I teach you today, you could use tomorrow or next week, as opposed to market updates where tomorrow I may have changed my mind or that may no longer be relevant. But obviously, we're in a very fluid situation. So what I started to do was I created a series of articles and then updates. And if you look at the menu on my website, you can click on that for the latest. I have been updating that every day, and my intention is to update it every day and anytime that I feel necessary. So I would urge you to check that out at davelandry.com. Now, let's get back into traits of traders. Good traders are humble. I'm a member of the American Association of Professional Technical Analysts, and the group there, it's kind of a pinch me moment when I was accepted as a member, because you've got Linda Rasky, who I'm friends with. Dick Fruth runs a bunch of money. I don't know if you may not have heard of him, but he runs a couple $100 million. He's also written a book on stocks. Larry McMillan, obviously, I'm really good friends with him. He's an options guy who literally wrote the book on options. Greg Morris, former member, since retired, used to run billions of dollars. Tom McClellan. The list goes on and on and on, and I hate to name too many because my friends will be like, why do you name me? You don't like me? It's like, yeah, I like you. It's just not enough time. Anyway, long story endless. The point is, at the bar after our meetings, we're not sitting around going like, I'm better than you, or I just made a whole bunch of money. It's like we're almost complaining, if anything, about what we could have done better, how the market handed our buttocks to us, and so on and so forth. And was really good. It was really great for me to see that I'm not the only one that is often humbled by the markets. And trust me, you will be too. Now, Steve Pressfield said something that just really struck a chord with me. The counterfeit innovator is wildly self-confident. The real one is scared to death. And if you go to davelandry.com/books-2-read, you can read Steve Pressfield's books along with quite a few other books that I would strongly urge you to read. But the counterfeit innovator is wildly self-confident. The real one is scared to death. Years ago, when I first did this presentation on traits of traders, I went to YouTube and I punched in traders just to see what would come up. And the first thing that comes up is this gentleman here riding around in his convertible Lamborghini with a big fake-breasted woman sticking her hands in the air like she just don't care. Well, that's not true to form when it comes to trading. The reality is you're not going to get rich quick, but these guys want to try to suck you in and fleece you. Now, some of them are what I call one-hit wonders. They made a lot of money over a short period of time. I've been up close and personal with someone who did that, turned about $5,000 into roughly $1 million. Unfortunately, he round tripped it in this particular case. And that's a 2-drink minimum story. But some of these guys do have some claim to fame, but the question is, could you repeat their performance? And the bigger question is, could they repeat their performance? I did meet someone who made $80 million trading, no kidding. But he told me he's not out there publicly saying he could do it again. He says, Dave, I was in the right place at the right time. It was like taking candy from a baby. So good traders are humble. They don't post their P&Ls. They don't brag about what they made, and it's not even noon. Some of these guys go on YouTube, oh, I just made all this money. It's not even noon. I'm not sure why I'm talking like Bill Clinton. They don't post pictures of themselves standing in front of Lambos. Hey, how'd that get in there? You know, it's funny. People are like, why do they call you Big Dave? It's like, well, that's me standing. That car is not a Matchbox car. I'm a big dude. Anyway, this is one that I talk about quite often. Good traders are flippant, but they're not flippant for the sake of being flippant. They're flippant in the execution of their system. They do what they have to do when they have to do it. It is what it is. So what? Much easier said than done, but they don't really care about what they're trading. They have no attachment to any particular market, and they're able to take whatever action is necessary without any remorse. They're also glad when stinkers stop out, and I am very happy sometimes when I have a losing trade in the portfolio and it stops out, so I no longer have to look at it. I'm not happy, don't get me wrong, but I'm glad that I no longer have to look at it. And I try to make light of the situation. I do my, what's his name, Giamatti as John Adams. I say good day, sir. Laugh to keep from crying sometimes, right? They're emotionally cognizant. So what do I mean by that? Well, your trading will spill over into your life, and your life will spill over into your trading. If you have a fight with your spouse or significant other, it's going to spill over into your trading. If your trading is going poorly, it's going to spill over into your life. You have to embrace your emotions. And I use that word embrace for a specific reason, which I'll get to in just one second. Emotions induced by one event will color how we think about other unrelated events. This is inside the investor's brain, the power over money. I just began reading this book. I would urge you to read it, and I will add it to books to read as soon as I'm finished reading it. But I'm definitely sure I'm going to add it to books to read. Anyway, so you have to be cognizant of your emotions. Now, I use the word embrace for a specific reason. You cannot make a decision without emotions, and this comes from research of Damasio and Shaw. And I actually saw Denise Scholl speak a few years back. I was speaking in San Francisco, and as was she. I think it's about 7 or 8 years now. But anyway, she was there, and that really struck a chord with me, and I've been talking about it quite often ever since. Every decision you make has an emotion attached to it, also has a consequence. And these emotions are keeping you alive and functioning as a human being. If you didn't have any emotions, you could easily be dead in a day. In fact, those, unfortunately, who had some sort of illness or injury can no longer make a decision. They can't make any decision. And these people end up institutionalized, unfortunately, because no one decision has a consequence over the other. And Denise Scholl gave the example. The doctor asked the patient, would you like to meet on Monday or Tuesday? And they said, well, Monday's blah, 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 blah. And then Tuesday, blah, 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 blah. But neither one had a consequence. Neither one of them, in other words, had an emotion over the other. So they arrive at a stalemate. Now, here's a word that's relatively new to me, but very, very relevant to trading. Good traders are clinically dispassionate. Larry Williams, as you know, now at StockCharts.com, which is pretty exciting. He once said, to make money as a trader, you have to not care. As soon as you start caring, you have emotional attachment. It's counterintuitive. The more you care, the less you make. That flippant thing comes to mind, right? flippant within parameters. The more you're clinically dispassionate and less attached to your trades, the more you will make. It's really quite simple, but very hard to accept. I have read this quote many, many, many times. It just really sums up trading. If you could wrap your head around this, then my work is done. I would drop the mic, but I've broken mics in presentations doing that. Anyway, before I digress too far, Robert Rotella Capital Management, he said an individual needs to keep an even temperament because one of the requirements in trading is to not get swept up in unbridled optimism or blown away in depths of despair. As I said before, Rotella wrote Elements of Successful Trading, and the psychology section is pretty good in the book. The rest of the book, it really didn't strike a chord with me. But the reason I think the psychology section was so good was Mr. Rotella was going through a drawdown at the time that he wrote the book. So I think a lot of that psychology is heartfelt. Now, along the lines of even temperament, good traders are even keeled. A lot of these sayings, I like to look up sayings to see what they mean. In the case of even keel, being a sailor, I'm pretty sure what they mean is the keel helps to keep you upright in a boat. If the keel breaks off from the boat, as occasionally has happened, or sometimes has happened in some of these racing yachts, the boat sinks or flips over at the least. So that keel keeps you on even keel, means that you're on the center line. And you have to be even keeled when it comes to trading. Now, good traders are students of the market. I'm amazed that I've been at this as long as I have, and I'm still blown away by what the market does. The market does things that I don't think it probably should do. For instance, recently, this little slide, as I wrote about, was more impressive than the slide we saw in 1929 and in 1987, at least the initial part of it. So obviously we don't know if it's over or not, but so far the velocity has been absolutely amazing. It's a business where it takes many, many years to know that you don't know everything, and then eventually you actually probably know more than you think you know. It's kind of weird. Initially, you think you know everything, especially if you start in a bull market. And I was thinking as I was going live this morning, one client of mine started in 2000, and every trade that he took, first trade and every trade that he took afterwards, was all on the short side. Correction, that was in 2007, I believe. So it was all on the short side, and he became really, really, really good at shorting, and he thought he knew everything. And when the market started going back up, he was humbled really quickly because he was still trying to short. So I woke up a few years back thinking about this curve. I drew it out as you see here. I just did a little YouTube capture from that video. And I thought I was pretty smart. And then eventually what you actually know is probably slightly above what you think you know. And that's kind of the learning curve, so to speak, of a trader. Well, after poking around the internet when I was doing that original presentation, I found out that's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where your confidence just goes through the roof, and as you get experience, you realize how little you really know, and then eventually you begin to gain true knowledge. Although I would say the right side of that curve is not nearly as steep as it is in reality. So it's the Socratic paradox, and as Socrates once said, I know that I know nothing. At least that was attributed to him. And that's very humbling in this business. Now, good traders are committed. And I looked up the definition of commitment, and I like to poke around until I find the one that works best for trading. And I have an encyclopedia or a set of encyclopedias just on psychology that I plan on reading someday, but for now I just use it as a reference. And I like the definition they had that says whatever it is that makes a person engage or continue a course of action when difficulties or positive alternatives influence the person to abandon the action. And we've had a lot of that obviously happening lately, with the market going straight up and more importantly straight down too. Now, you must commit to commitment devices. When I did presentations on Acrasia, I talked about commitment devices. And in fiction, a commitment device would be like Ulysses chaining himself to the mast and putting wax in the crew's ears so he wouldn't be sucked into the siren call. In the writing of fiction, Herman Melville, author of Moby Dick, allegedly had his wife chain him to the desk until he finished. Victor Hugo allegedly put on a sackcloth and gave his clothes to his friends and said, hey, do not give me my clothes back until I finish this book. So it's whatever it takes. James Clear wrote a pretty good book called Atomic Habits. I'd recommend you read it. Do the right thing in the future by making bad habits difficult in the present. As I've said before, I used to have a brewery in the garage, and at any given time, I'd have 20 gallons or more of beer available. That made it pretty easy to drink beer. Now, when I've moved, I didn't get around. I sold the brewery because it was so big and took up half the garage, and I've downsized, so I don't know if I'm going to set that up again. But I could tell you this. If I had an unlimited supply of beer and I decided that I don't want to drink during the week because I get up at 4:55 a.m., but there's a limited supply of beer, I would be tempted to have a beer. Now, I actually have to physically go to the store, and it's like, I'll just eat supper and not worried about going to the store. Now, truth be told, we did stock up on quite a bit of beer just in case we have to be quarantined for a few weeks. So that is certainly tempting me right now, or at least tonight it will. So if you feel a siren call of day trading, micromanaging, or anything else that's outside of your core methodology, a lot of times just take a deep breath. It only takes a few seconds to get past the amygdala, that real emotional part of your brain, to the rest of what's sloshing around up there. A simple thing you can do is turn off your screens. Go for a walk. Go for a bike ride. Go to the gym. And as I often say, take your wife or significant other to lunch. Now, don't take them both at the same time, and that's going to create a lot more stress. I know I'm joking, but recently my wife sticks her head in the office, and I'm standing in front of my quote screen, and that's one of my commitment devices, is that if I'm going to watch a screen, I can only do it standing up. And that reminds me, as I get kind of tired of standing there looking at the screen, that maybe I shouldn't be watching the screen, especially given my methodology. So my wife sticks her head in the office, you want to go to lunch? And I realize, wait a minute, I'm going to lose a lot of money sitting here watching a screen and taking unnecessary action. Or I'm a big fan of lunch, obviously, hence the name Big Dave. I'll go to lunch. And that has kept me out of a lot of trouble. One thing to recognize is that the micro is more important than the macro, and that's why commitment devices are so damn easy. Or so necessary, I should say, because doing the wrong thing is so damn easy. Many times, if I'm sitting here watching the screen, I am very much tempted to do the wrong thing because I'm thinking that, well, longer term, and that's that acrasia word we talked about a few weeks back, that's where that acrasia gets in. Well, I'll do the right thing later. I'm not going to exercise today. I can exercise tomorrow and maybe next week. But in trading, the micro is so important that you have to really stick to it. The point is like, okay, you don't exercise today, maybe get around tomorrow, whatever, that's fine. But you can't keep putting that off. And definitely in trading, you can't get a little bit pregnant. You've got to do the right thing. And that right thing is a micro in placing that order and placing that protective stop or taking those profits when offered. So you really have to deal in the micro when you're trading. Now, in order to trade, you're going to need help. No one is self-made. Now, I don't know if it's in part because of all those get-rich-quick gurus out there, but for some reason in trading, people are ashamed to ask for help. And as far as I'm concerned, there's a few things in life maybe more important than trading, but I think it's one of the most important things because longer term, your money is going to be very important for your well-being. So get educated there. A lot of people, friends and family coming out the woodwork, freaking out about this 2020 bear market, not knowing what to do. And I don't want to be flippant in a bad way, but you should have a plan going in and know what you're going to do when, not if, things turn sour. So nobody is self-made. I was heavily into sailing. I plan to get back into it someday, but on a much lower level. Maybe just cruise around and enjoy myself a little bit here and there. But I was into ocean racing, and I started this whole venture by buying a sailboat, and I bought a book on sailing. And of course, I learned from that book I learned on sailing, and I learned a hell of a lot by going out in the ocean, got some experience, and a lot of the fellow crew members helped me out. Obviously, we didn't go straight to the ocean, or I didn't go straight to the ocean. I learned a lot about sailing coastally and in lakes, local lakes and things like that. So we all get help. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. Don't be ashamed to get educated, okay? Now, obviously, you're going to need some money to trade. And I know that's a big duh, but even if you could afford to trade, you still need to put some money aside for trading. I was thinking right as I was going live, years ago, I had a little currency trading system, and a friend of mine asked me if I would trade it for him. And I'm like, sure, no problem. And I said, probably need about 5,000 in margin. And you would have thought that 5,000 was the only 5,000 he ever had, but he spent way more than $5,000 a year on just the maintenance of his boat. But he would call me up on a Sunday. It was like, well, Japanese Parliament's meeting tonight. The system traded yen. What are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to follow the mechanical system. And I would give him that answer every time he'd bring things up. And I didn't even know that Japanese Parliament was going to meet. And I surely didn't know they were talking about what to do with the currency or intervention or whatever the case may be. So you're going to need some money. And even if you can afford to trade, you're going to have to put some money aside and dedicate it for just trading. And by the way, even if you don't have money, I would suggest, or I should say if you do have money, learn to trade without using real money. If you don't have enough money to trade, then get educated what little money you do have. Paper trade, and when you have money, then begin trading with real money. Now, you're going to need support or approval of your significant other. And that's going to be, sometimes can be really tough. But you need to be willing to lay out a plan, trade your plan, and be as transparent as possible and do the right thing. And as I've said in prior presentations on these traits of traders, make sure that you are holding yourself accountable. And that's a big one, and that's a really, really tough one. You're also going to need a lot of patience. Like we discussed in prior presentations, you need two forms of patience. One, the patience to wait patiently for the setup, and two, the patience to wait in the setup. Now, we kind of beat the dead horse on those things, so go back and watch those prior ones. You have to be willing to commit to do what's necessary. And I was thinking again right before I went live, how this is the hardest, easiest thing that you'll ever do. Let's say you're going to trade textbook TKO setups, which we also talked about previously. And your entry goes in above the high, your stop goes in below the low, and then you do a little math. The entry minus the stop is going to give you your initial profit target projection. Well, all you have to do is place an order to enter above that high, and then if triggered, place a stop below the low, and then either use a limit order or an alert to let you know when that initial profit target, or if it's hit, and then you take those partial profits. I know, that's all you have to do. It reminds me of many times, as I said quite often, back when we lived in the country and on 6 acres, and it was always a project and always something going on. And my wife was like, well, all you got to do is go with your wrench to fix this little plumbing issue. And of course, 3 hours later, I'm soaked and back and forth to the hardware store, maybe even phoning a friend, or at worst, calling a professional in. So it's never as easy as it looks. Now, good traders are goal-oriented. And they're goal-oriented, not like I'm going to make X on this trade or a Y on this trade or make a whole bunch of money, but they're more goal oriented in that they follow the process. Their goal is to follow the process, such as I said earlier, put the entry where the entry goes, the stop where the stop goes, take profits where you're supposed to take profits, and then trail that stop higher. It's all laid out, right? All you have to do is just do it. But good traders are goal oriented and actually following that plan. Now, during less than ideal conditions, you have to keep yourself extremely busy outside of the markets. And if you are looking during your analysis or whatever, I say take the can't stand it test, okay? Do you really think you have the mother of all setups? If conditions aren't conducive to your methodology, like right now, as a trend follower, the trend is down. If I saw a long, it would have to be a really good looking setup. And I would just have to feel like I can't stand it. If I didn't take the trade, I just couldn't live with myself. So you really have to take that can't stand it test. Every presentation I say, I'm not going to say this because I always say this, but you got to be really careful to separate intuition from intuition. And that's a line from Ed Sakota from Market Wizards. Now, in every action, you have to ask yourself, are you moving toward or away from your goal? And I should say in every micro action, if you're going to take an unnecessary trade, an unnecessary day trade, an unplanned day trade, an unplanned trade in general, you need to stop and say, are you stealing from your future self? This is that equation thing. And are you moving toward or away from your goal? Like a lot of people, I'm sure out there with all the shiny objects, I have a little bit of an ADD problem or ADHD, whatever you call it. My wife says I'm on the spectrum. And it's like, so I find myself, if I'm on a news website or something, I was like, why am I here? If I'm looking at YouTube videos or whatever, it's like, is this moving me toward or away from the goal? But what I'm talking about here more specifically, obviously you want to focus your behavior on becoming a better trader and studying charts and doing your analysis and all these other things. But what I'm talking about here is in every trading action, is that helping you to achieve your longer term goals? Okay, if you're looking for more information, again, davelandry.com/stockcharts. You'll get the slides and a bunch of links and videos and stuff to keep you busy for a long time. And then I would hope you would take it one step further and begin to take the courses and become a member of the Facebook group and so on and so forth. All that information is in the email that I'll send you on this. If you need to reach me, davelandry.com/contact. So thanks for watching, and may the trend be with you.